could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
Let that minister to you. And in your order of service, you will see those lyrics. And let's just sing that with Spirit Song together. You'll find those lyrics in your order of service. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're
Spirit song, Your Loving is a Miracle. And I've seen you standing around the bed of somebody dying, singing your songs and watching everyone who's there, including the person whose life is in its last breaths, just watching the warmth, watching the shift in people's bodies, how they're feeling. You bring a love that is incredible through your music and your dedication, and we're so thankful to you for it. It's a great honor to be up here, especially today, of all days, when we recognize and thank and commission our care team members. Barbara originally was going to be speaking, Reverend Prose, and for various reasons, it didn't work out for her to do that today, so she passed on to me her notes and stories, and so this is really a message from the two of us today. Barbara and I have been noticing more and more that people at All Souls have been connecting with each other and supporting each other in ways that are so beautiful that it breaks their hearts open. And in witnessing it, it has broken our hearts open too. Elaine is an example. Many of us know Elaine if we were fortunate enough for her to bring us a meal at some time when we were going through a time of stress or loss or death in our lives as part of our Helping Souls ministry, because Elaine's meals, of all the meals, are particularly unforgettable gourmet meals. Because I received one myself. It almost makes me want to have another surgery just so that, almost, not quite, but Elaine started helping Glenn shortly before Betty died, his wife. She used to take him to doctor's appointments, and even sometimes she would take Betty to her appointments. After Betty died, you can imagine that Glenn was heartbroken and lonely. They'd been married over 50 years. He hardly could remember what the world was like without Betty in it. He hardly could even imagine. So Elaine, she just started checking in on him. That wasn't part of the Helping Souls program, but she just had developed this relationship, and Glenn's daughters live out of town, and the care team eventually thought, hey, we need to find somebody to be a helping soul with Glenn to start regularly checking on him. And Elaine volunteered because she was already basically doing that. She was then his companion through moving out of his apartment into an assisted living facility. And then once he was there, she'd go visit him all the time, week after week, go see him. And after a while, she realized that since going in, he'd never gone out anywhere for a long time. And she knew he liked root beer floats. And so one day she said, "Glenn, what do you say we go for a root beer float?" He was delighted. And Elaine saw how Glenn lit up, how he came alive as they went out into the day and enjoyed fun and laughter and ice cream. So this has become a weekly ritual for the two of them ever since. I've even spotted them sitting here in the pews a few times in the last couple of months together. Now, understandably, Glenn was sad and lonely and even angry after his wife died. It was a hard time moving out, finding a place, living in a new place. But all of us who know Glenn have watched the smile come back to his face again. He's growing more gracious and appreciative in a way even that we'd never seen before. Glenn is a scholar. You have to know, if you know Glenn, scholar, a teacher, a writer who had a distinguished career. And a few months ago, Ellen gave him a gift of a book that he had written. It was out of print, but she found it at a used bookstore, wrapped it up, and brought it to him. And I have Elaine's permission to share that when she gave it to him, he was so appreciative, he said for the first time, "I love you." Now, you should know that Elaine is a very busy working person. She says her life is more full of meaning because of this relationship. And I would say because of her selfless love, her life is more full of meaning. They're not just friendly souls. They're soul friends. And I think of the work of Walter Armstrong and the other men in our prostate cancer support group. Well, it would be typical for men with prostate cancer to be silent, to not talk about it. These men use their suffering and their experience for the benefit of others. And Faith Boudreau and Alicia McLean, who run our Trekkers Cancer Support Group. These are survivors helping others survive in one of the scariest times of their lives. When we're willing to be with each other through the valley of the shadow of darkness and despair, we end up learning more about our own strengths, that we have the strength to walk with someone through cancer, through death, through dying. None of us really know until we do it that we even have the capacity to love like that. People discover how big their hearts are, and they fall in love with each other in a non-romantic way. We don't talk enough about that kind of love in our culture anymore. By showing up in these ways, we end up falling in love with the people that in our own lives even more fully, because we've recognized a part of our own capacity to be with people and to sit with people in hard times and in good times. Barbara mentioned earlier how the Spirit song, how when they were singing for one of our members at a hospice facility, when they finished, and the nurses are always, and the people in the facility are always crying when they get done. They came up to them and said, "We have this person in the other room who's actively dying, and nobody's with them. They're all alone." is there any chance that you'd be willing, we understand if you can't, but would be willing to maybe go and sing a few songs for him? And they did. And one of the members said it was the most powerful experience of all the singing for her. They were giving love for love's sake. This wasn't someone they knew. This wasn't a friend. Because they had the opportunity to be the embodiment of love in the world for somebody who was all alone. And our longtime member, Alicia Hall, who is the leader of the Spirit Song Choir, unfortunately she's going to be with us today. She's caring for her daughter, who happens to be dying. She's on hospice herself, her own daughter, who's been struggling with cancer for a couple of years now. I speak from experience that no parent wants to ever hold the hand of their child while they're dying. And while this is all happening, Alicia every week makes her way to the Spirit Song rehearsals so that they can continue to be ready to sing. And it's become a moment of joy and connection in the midst of all of this, to be together with this small group of singers who become more than friends. They're soul friends with each other. A small group of lovers in the agape sense of love. Friends to the dying. None of us really knows until we do it that we have the capacity to love like this. People discover in doing these ministries with each other the capacity we have for love by showing up for each other. Kate Johnson calls these radical friendships in her book by that title. Kate Johnson. She says, these are the kinds of friendships that have the potential to heal us at the very ground of our being. Wounds from when we were young, maybe even wounds from before we were born. These kinds of friendships that forge bonds so strong that systems of oppression can't break them. The kind of friendships that help us gather enough power and love that we can profoundly transform ourselves and the world. That's what we're about here at All Souls. Finding our capacity to love so that we can not only transform ourselves, but also the world. Learning how big our hearts are. The Greeks had 3 words for love. Eros, the romantic form of love that we all think about, the erotic. Philia, which is about friend love, family, love for family, and those kinds of things. And then agape, the love of God, or the love of all creation. In the famous passage in the Christian scriptures, 1 Corinthians 13, it's agape love that they're talking about. And here it is from what's become one of my favorite translations, the Message Bible. If I speak with human eloquence and angelic ecstasy, but don't love, I'm nothing but the creaking of a rusty gate. If I speak God's word with power, revealing all the mysteries and making everything plain as day, and if I have faith that says to a mountain, jump, and it jumps, but I don't have love, I'm nothing. If I give everything I own to the poor and even go to the stake to be burned as a martyr, but I don't love, I've gotten nowhere. So no matter what I say, what I believe, what I do, I'm bankrupt without love. Love never gives up. Agape love never gives up. Love cares more for others than for self. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. Love doesn't strut. Love doesn't have a swelled head, doesn't force itself on others. It is not always me first, doesn't fly off the handle, doesn't keep score of the sins of others, doesn't revel when others grovel or take pleasure, or it does take pleasure in the flowering of truth. It puts up with anything, trusts God always, always looks for the best, never looks back, but keeps going to the end. Love never dies. Inspired speech will be over someday. Praying in tongues will end. Understanding will reach its limits. We know only a portion of the truth. And what we say about God is always incomplete. But when the complete arrives, our incompletes will be canceled. When I was an infant at my mother's breast, I gurgled and cooed like an infant. When I grew up, I left those infant ways for good. We don't yet see things clearly. We're squinting in a fog, peering through a mist. But it won't be long before the weather clears and the sun shines bright. We'll see it all then, see it all as clearly as God sees us, knowing God directly just as God knows us. But for right now, until that completeness, we have 3 things to do to lead us towards that consummation: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. We love you, Barbara and Gerald and Kathy and Doug and John and all the ministers who have served this church over the years. And all the caregivers who we honor today. We love you. And for that, our lives are richly blessed. Thank you. Amen. Thank you for joining us. For 100 years, All Souls in Tulsa has been a beacon of this free faith. We offer our services and programs freely online for all those who are interested. You can help us to do this by making a one-time gift today or a reoccurring pledge. We really appreciate you joining us and being a part of helping us make All Souls in Tulsa what it is. Thank you.
In your order of service, you'll also find the words to this next song that David and I would like to have you join us. Somebody cared for me, had me on their mind, and they took the time and cared for me. Please join us as we sing. Somebody cared for me, had me on their mind, took the time and cared for me. I'm so glad they cared. I'm so glad they